brand positioning, to put it super simply, is who are you talking to? What are you saying to them? And then most importantly, why should they care?
Welcome to the Mastering Ecommerce Marketing podcast. I'm your host, Eitan Koter, co-CEO of Vimy. In an era of rising acquisition costs and increased competition, this podcast is dedicated to helping you drive sales, engage customers, and build meaningful communities so you can turn passive visitors into active buyers. Now let's get started with the episode. Hello listeners, and welcome to another episode of Mastering Ecommerce Marketing. We have a great guest today. I've been waiting a lot for interviewing Kathy Guzmán Galloway, head of Wizard at the Clarity Wizard. Hey, Kathy, welcome to the show. How are you?
Yeah, I'm great. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. Appreciate it.
Okay, great. So what do you mean by head wizard?
So at the Clarity Wizard, we help brands optimize brand positioning, which leads to increased consumer love and decreased risk. And we really started working on that, sort of evolved into that area of work. Because of myself as the head wizard, my background is in traditional, classically trained CPG. I spent a great number of years in the PepsiCo universe. And as I started my consulting practice, I really was looking at, total brand strategy and how do you really grow your business. But the more and more work that I did, I discovered that brand positioning was really at the core of everything. And there really was nothing that I would touch as a strategist that didn't eventually lead me right back to brand positioning, and that brand positioning is at the core of everything. And as I continued to work with my clients, I often would get fun names. They would give me names, brand doula, brand therapist, and then eventually someone said, you're just like a wizard. Like, it really helps to create this clarity around what I'm trying to accomplish. And that's sort of where the name was born. And so as the head wizard, my superpower of really being able to simplify what feel like complex ideas, which ultimately is all brand positioning is. It's really complex pieces of information that you're trying to simplify to influence consumer behavior. That superpower really came to the forefront, and the kind of the name stuck. So head wizard at the Clarity Wizard works well for what we are trying to accomplish.
Great. So one of the new definition of wizard is someone who is increasing love and reducing risk, right? So that's great to know. Exactly. And branding is so important these days. I mean, that's probably like people are not buying features or functionalities of products, right? So,
right.
And one of the best way to differentiate it through your unique self, what's your differentiated and what's your background. I mean, a unique story and why you started this business. I mean, there's so many great topics to be discussed here. So, but let's start from the basics, right? About consumers, and we know that there is a lot of evolution in consumer behavior. Let's talk about that, and how do you think brands should stay on top of that evolution?
Yeah, this is a super important point, particularly for brands that live in the digital space. The consumer is moving today at a speed that is unheard of. It's unrealistic. It is beyond our ability to keep up with them in many ways. And you should look at yourself as a model of that, and just how your own life and your own understanding of the world has evolved from the 80s, if you happen to be old enough to remember the 80s.
I am.
As I am. Think about what the world looked like then and what it was to be a consumer in the marketplace then, all the way up until now, and what it is to be a consumer now, and just the amount of knowledge and savviness that consumers have today about what marketing is, about how brands use social media, about when they're being advertised to and when they are being asked to have a behavior change, and their knowledge and expertise around branding, and how personal branding itself has become this huge part of our culture that they see, certainly through celebrities, but even just day-to-day people around them that are really building names for themselves, whether that's super locally or at the macro level. And so all of this education they've had means that in some ways it feels like that makes it more difficult. And in some real ways it does, in that you have to keep up with the speed of it. But in many ways, it's actually made things a little bit easier in that you can shorthand a lot of communication to the consumer. And so for the brands, for brand owners, brand leaders, what's really important here is that you're staying connected to the consumer as much as humanly possible. So that means leveraging your some of the simplest basic things, right? Leveraging your list of folks who have bought into your brand and sending surveys to them, reaching out to them and inviting them for one-on-one conversations. Those people who've been with your business for a long time, those who are maybe new, those who came and then left, reaching out and having conversations with them. It also means staying on top of a learning plan over the course of the year. So, we're recording this in October. When you hear this, if you haven't already, it's a great time to start thinking, what do I need to learn about the consumer in 2025? And what are some of the things I can do to get myself smarter about the consumers, which, by the way, you can do that at any budget level. Budget should never be a reason why you can't learn about your audience. There are solutions for you at every price point. So figuring out that learning plan for 2025 really helps you set you up for what are the things I need to continuously learn about my audience. And then the last thing is that I think there was a time, certainly when I grew up in the marketing world, that we kind of thought as consumers as sort of dumb, or that maybe they weren't fully educated, or they didn't have the right information. This is really where this perception of marketing came, that we're tricking people, right? Because back then they could trick people because they didn't know about fancy photography, or that when you say natural, we don't really know what that means, right? There was a time where we didn't know that, but consumers are much smarter now. And so what that means is that transparency is your friend in many cases. And having those conversations with consumers continuously and having a spirit of transparency, those two things can really help progress a brand forward in knowing who the audience is and where they're moving to as time passes.
Yeah. This change or evolution that you see in consumers are happening across the various generations, because we know that Gen Zs are more towards authenticity, about realness, right? To be genuine, create that kind of a community, support various causes, right? And so you see this happening across all generation, or is this something that is probably more focused on the new generation coming into the shopping industry?
This is a spectacular question, because often when I see brands articulate who their consumer is, we're often seeing them still leveraging demographic information to connect to the consumer. Mm-hmm. This is a difficult topic, particularly for e-com brands, because there is a dichotomy in how we have to think about the consumer. We have to think about the consumer in very specific ways, because obviously as you market and execute your plan, you're going to go after someone by really specific metrics. This person is 25 to 30. They are subscribed to basketball leagues. They also shop at Whole Foods, and I'm going to serve them an ad. That is exactly what we should be doing to execute at the digital level. However, strategically, when we are thinking about the business more holistically, and you're really thinking about planning over the course of a year or even 5 years long term, it's important for us to step back and think about the one idea of a consumer that is most closely aligned with our brand. And in today's world, that is not a demographic definition.
Okay.
Right? So if we think, I'll give you an example of a brand I use often to describe this. That would be like Gatorade is a good brand for that. In that, if we think about who buys Gatorade in really big volumes, this is going to be regular everyday people who they're not athletes. Maybe they work out several times a week, or maybe it's for their kids who play some sports, or maybe they go fishing and they bring that, or maybe they just need to work outside in the yard and it's hot, and so they need to replenish, right? There's really no necessarily athletic mindset to using the product. However, if you reflect on the decades and decades that Gatorade has been in the marketplace and how they have presented their ideal audience, or certainly their design target, what we see is a elite athlete, right? You can imagine the ads that, if you never got to see them, or if you had the chance to see them back in the day, the ads of these gigantic stars of Michael Jordan, even today, the LeBron James of the world, consuming the product. And what Gatorade did by doing that over the years is establish in us an identity for that brand that is very closely aligned to elite athleticism and the personality traits that go with that kind of athlete, which is someone who's determined, someone who's a go-getter, somebody who doesn't let other things stop them, someone who's excited about life. These are traits that can exist in anyone, whether you've ever picked up a basketball or not. It's irrelevant, right? And so they are marketing to both sides of the coin. One, we've got to establish this identity for the brand that's tied to an idea of a person that I can connect with as a consumer. And then as we trickle down the marketing funnel, then I've got to talk to you specifically about your life and your situation. And unfortunately, a lot of brands fall into that second camp, as they should. They're executing at that more detailed level, but they don't establish the idea of this consumer at the strategic level.
Yes. So they know the customer to a certain level. They don't go deeper to lifestyles and behaviors, right? And emotions that are probably common denominator by the customers.
Exactly. The common denominator is ultimately what we're looking for, right? If you are listening right now and you know you've got, sometimes they're called personas, they're called avatars, whatever you're calling these definitions of segments of consumers. If you are unable to pull all of those people together and identify those commonalities, these personalities, these psychographic, these real world traits about them that gives you a common place from which to start a conversation, you've missed a huge opportunity in brand building. And that's really how I would think about that. So that's all to say that at that strategic level, I don't want to hear anyone talking about Gen Zs or millennials or boomers. I like to say that demographics don't matter unless they matter. If you are selling something to pregnant women, obviously demographics are going to matter. It matters her age. It matters that she's a female, right? Obviously that matters. But if you are selling furniture, or if you are selling phones or electronics, glasses, jewelry, potato chips, in those cases, it's not really about the demographics. It's really about the person's perception of the world and how you fit into that.
Great. So this was a amazing 10 minutes of having this clarity on the foundation of consumers, right? So it was really fascinating and interesting. How this is connected to branding, right? And the way retailers or brands can position themselves through branding. And maybe you can discuss e-com scenarios, but also brick and mortar scenarios, right?
Yeah. And when you say how they use that for branding, how to leverage this consumer to develop an identity, right, in the brand, or rather in the marketplace. And I think this is a brand by brand question. So if you are a brand founder that has become really popular since just before the pandemic, and certainly has exploded since, continued to grow since. You yourself have created a brand or a product based on your own experience in the world because you recognize this particular thing was missing from the world and you've brought it to the world. Then the identity of that brand must and should be really anchored in your point of view. You have a point of view about the world that makes this a business, a product, a mission that you have to bring it to the world. And that view, that perspective needs to be front and center. So I could give a good example of this. This is an old brand, but I could see how it would come to life today. Ben & Jerry's. Right. So for Ben & Jerry as an ice cream brand, it was really about these two men who were great friends and wanted to do great things in the world. But also, by the way, I love ice cream. And I love ice cream with lots of chunky things in them. This is not actually how their story goes, but we'll use it as an illustration, right? So I've then, as Ben & Jerry, I've decided I'm going to create this ice cream brand. And that is going to allow me to then bring my social mission vision to life elsewhere.
Yeah.
The brand then becomes a lot of me. So you see that sort of 70s Woodstock vibe, this sort of really quirky, like their point of view on the world is present in that product. The other way that this could happen, and by the way, I should close the loop on that. What happens in that type of scenario typically is that you then find the consumer that matches your point of view. You find the consumer then that also loves chunky ice cream. You find the consumer that also likes this this style of messaging and branding, and that they're connected with you through these other psychographics, right? The other side of the coin is what happens much more often in the world of business, which is you've inherited a brand, or you've purchased a brand, or you've created a product really for the purpose of capturing white space. I know this is an opportunity. I'm going to go execute this, right? So there's a little less passion and love for that specific area, but a valid way, right, to grow a brand and grow a business. In this case, it's about understanding the marketplace. It's about understanding if I am going to launch a brand of office supplies, and I personally don't have a passion for office supplies, but this feels like a good white space, then I need to understand who is buying office supplies today and why do they buy them? And then who isn't buying, or who used to buy and stopped buying? Who's making their own office supplies? And understand who is out there today that I feel I can develop a product or a brand that would connect with them. And if I already have a product or brand and I've never thought about this before, those people have already found you. They're already there. They have naturally found their way to you. It's about mining the data that you have to figure out who exactly is this person and how do I connect that to what I'm trying to accomplish as a brand's leader? What are the gaps I see in my being able to connect with them that's going to get me to that next level of whether that's revenue or profitability or whatever your key metric is for that time frame. So it really, again, that really depends on how are you coming at it from the business. But either way, there has to be a connection between the business's point of view, the business's objectives, and what the consumer is reacting to when they connect with your brand. How do we connect those pieces?
What is like the consumer sentiment or their emotional triggers that are happening? I mean, we see like two competitive companies, right? Selling the same products, targeting the same users, but they use different probably marketing channels. And if you ask consumers, they say different things about these companies, although they sell the same products and targeting the same people, because, you know, consumer sentiment, the emotional packaging around that whole engagement and interaction with the brand is totally different. So for a smaller, medium-sized brand, once you identify that and you know how to clearly define your audience, just stick with it, right? Just leverage this and provide more value to this specific target market, right?
Yes, exactly. I think that's the real value in identifying who this person is. And I'll say a person, but again, recognizing that we're really looking for psychographics, an idea of who this person is, less their demographics. Well, once you've figured that out, what it does is open up the door for you to really hit it home with that person. It makes decisions so much clearer. So a great way to think about this is through the lens of innovation. So if we go back to Gatorade as an easy example of that, and think about the way that portfolio has grown over the years. And I welcome the audience to even look at what Gatorade is doing today. Head over to their website and just see the kinds of products they're launching. everything they've done has been in the mindset of an elite athlete, and then finding ways, how do I make what an elite athlete needs accessible to someone who is not an elite athlete, who is my direct consumer, right? How do I make that easier for them? Where LeBron James has all these people to bring these products over to him. If you are playing basketball on the weekends, you need a solution that's easy, short term, that you can execute right now, but in the spirit of this elite athlete who is LeBron James, right? And
Yes.
so once you figure out who this person is, now I can go deep on, well, what do you really need? And what else do you need? And when else do you need it? And how else do you need it? And really dig so deep and hard into that you really become the go-to brand for that consumer in that moment in time. And, you know, if we pick on another gigantic brand that I know we've been talking about furniture, that would be like IKEA. They know exactly who their audience is. This is someone who's looking for a great deal and who's not afraid of kind of getting in there, doing it themselves, and that they enjoy the feeling that they've accomplished something. That's super clear. So everything that IKEA does caters to that mindset, to that real feeling of feeling like you've a little bit smarter than other people. It's cheaper, it's faster. I did it myself. Look at me. I'm a little bit better than everyone else. And they've been able to nail that. And that's really ultimately how we can think about expanding the services, the offerings, is what else can I do for this person? And it takes a long time before you can get to, or before you should get to, who is the next person. Right? We don't want to get to that until you have truly maximized the opportunity on that first person. And the reason for that is that everyone on the call should, or on this listening, should know, it's really hard to market to people. It's a lot of money. It's expensive. There's a lot of trial and error. And the best possible way to move forward is to find this one space and really do an amazing job there. This is why you see Gatorade continue to innovate on products that are talking to that same audience and not really straying from that.
Yeah, so you mentioned doing a great job, right? You have this clarity and understanding. What else? So how do you do that? I mean, what's some of the brand position execution, maybe steps or workflows that brands needs to implement?
Yeah, it's a great question. So first, we've talked a lot already about the consumer, understanding the consumer and really thinking about what that mindset is. The second piece is then understanding the brand itself. Through the lens of the organization, who do we want to be? What is it that we want to accomplish? What's our purpose? What's our mission? What are our values? And what do we want to stand by no matter what? And then it's finding the overlap between them, right? This is what the consumer wants. This is what we want. This is what's in the marketplace. How can we differentiate ourselves in that universe? And there are varying levels of differentiation, particularly on the e-com side, for those brands that may have a lot of products or they have a lot of presence in a number of retail, online retail channels. Finding the thing, the brand promise, that key piece of information that you want the consumer to take away. That whenever they're engaging with your brand, they're getting that same feeling, message, idea, that it is consistent in everything that you do. And that shows up in a lot of places. The easiest things are going to be your product, your packaging, your messaging, obviously. But then there's also, what retail channels do you show up in? Does that fit the narrative? What are you doing on social media beyond advertising and organic posts? What are you doing in social media to engage with the audience in a way that reinforces this brand promise? How are you hiring people? What kind of people are representing your brand? So if your company is a sort of hybrid model where you're selling something online, but then eventually they've got to engage with a human, what kind of human is it? Does this human reinforce the stories and the messages that we're telling the consumer? Who are the partners that we are working with? So when a consumer goes to do a little research on your brand and find out where these products are being built or sourced from, Are they going to be happy with the story that they see? Does it connect back to this promise that you're making? What are the news stories they're seeing about you? What are the press releases you're making? How are you dressing at events? What kind of clothing is your team wearing? If your brand is all about sustainability, are you wearing clothes that are reused, that are made from recycled materials? How is that positioning continue to trickle down in literally every single touch point, not only for the consumer, but also your employees, and as part of how you're building that culture? That really is where brand positioning lives and dies. It's in the execution of it.
Yes. And it's like, it's all over the enterprise, right? It's like in every step of the process.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So working with brands and working with companies out there, what are some of the common mistakes that you see that relates to positioning that brands are doing?
Yeah, the first one is, I'm a broken record, not knowing the consumer well enough. That is literally always the first thing. And it's the thing I probably spend the most time talking about, whether on podcasts and articles or with clients. We got to know our consumer, period. The second one is getting confused about where your point of difference exists. Often when I'm working with a brand on their brand purpose or their brand mission, they're really focused on how this is unique and different from other brands. And actually, that has nothing to do with differentiation.
Mm-hmm.
The purpose for your brand and why you exist and why you show up in the world is personal, whether to you as a founder or to your organization. And it is anchored in real things happening in the world. That's enough. The consumer doesn't necessarily need to say, wow, you're doing something so unique. And the reason is that we're talking about huge, big things, right? If we go back to Ben and Jerry's, they're really all about social justice and really changing the way the world works. I would love all brands to work on that. As a consumer, there's no reason for this to be just you. If anything, we'd encourage you to get other brands to also work on these issues, right? And so the idea that purpose needs to be differentiated is the wrong way of thinking of it. And then the other side of differentiation that they get wrong is where the differentiation exists within the brands and how we communicate it. Too often we're focused on, to your point earlier, on attributes. I've got the fastest processing speed. This will last in your home for 30 years, or this is a thing that's going to make you lose weight in 10 minutes. Yes, they're valuable, but the attributes also ladder up to something more emotional where we're actually problem solving. It's not that I need my furniture to last 30 years. It's that I want to invest in something that makes me feel like I've got a thing with me for my whole life that feels almost like an heirloom. Or it's that I just don't want to think about this. I never want to think about buying another dresser again. And maybe that's the emotional thing that you're selling, right? There's always an emotion there. The question is, which emotion are you connecting to? And then how do those attributes deliver on that emotion? I think those really are the kind of key areas I see people
Areas, yes.
Struggling on the execution of it.
So, Kathy, tell us more about the Clarity Wizard. What's the company doing? What type of services you provide?
Yeah, so the Clarity Wizard, we spend a lot of time working with brands on clarifying what is the brand positioning. And brand positioning, to put it super simply, is who are you talking to? What are you saying to them? And then most importantly, why should they care? The why should they care is the part that takes the longest. As we're really peeling the onion, is why does this person care that I'm selling a sustainable water bottle? Like, so what? There's a lot of water bottles out there. Why do they care, right? And this is really where we spend the time. We do a ton of consumer research. And as I said earlier, there are tools for research at every price point. And we believe wholly in right sizing research. So the size of your business, the size of the opportunity dictate how much you really should be spending on research. But there's a solution for everyone. So that's one piece. The second piece is our work is really based a lot on workshopping. The truth is that positioning, just like strategy, it really only comes to light through talking and thinking. There is no shortcut to this. It's not like you're going to sit down and say, let me think my strategy. I'm going to write it out. Great, I'm done. It doesn't work that way. It's about really talking through all of the points that matter, and making sure that you've considered the alternatives so you have the conviction on the direction that you're headed. And so my job and my team's job in creating the clarity there is as facilitators. So at this point, we've worked on over 30 product categories, held hundreds of workshops. And so we can see and understand where teams struggle to articulate to each other their point of view. So what you see a lot in our workshops is me saying, but say more about that. When you said this, you also were talking about that. What is the connection there? And why are you making that assumption? And also, Julia over here, she said this, but that's different than what, Vanessa was saying. So how do we reconcile this so that when we get to the end, we've really gone through the rigor on thinking about this. And when we get to the output, everybody feels comfortable. Great. I feel like we've really come to a place that we can agree on. And there's no further debate because we've debated it as a team. And then often we take that and bring it back to the consumer in whatever form that takes, packaging design or advertising or new product concepts, and let the consumer repeat it back to us. And more of the majority of that is really a checkpoint. We think we're saying this. We think we're doing this. Is the consumer seeing what we're saying? Are they repeating that back to us? Okay, great. We've done our job. Go execute. Or we've got to optimize because we think we're saying one thing, but they're hearing something else. Let's fix that.
Yeah. I assume there's a lot of
really how you work with us.
It's not an easy process. There's a lot of emotions involved, and the ego is probably making a lot of things difficult, right? So.
Yes, the ego, both from the business side and the consumer side, actually. Yes, ego can be hard to reconcile with, which is what's so great about facts. So I often will say to a client, will say, well, but I don't know about this, I don't know about that. This is easy to solve. Let's go ask the consumer. Let's let the consumer tell us. We don't need to debate that as a group. I don't need to argue with you what you believe. The consumer can tell us. And then there's no more debate, right? I love that.
Yes. So, Kathy, how people can find you?
I'd love you to find me. Yes, you can find me on LinkedIn, pretty active there. And I accept invitations. You can go and search for Kathy Guzmán Galloway. I'm sure it'll be in the show notes. But you can also find us on our website, is theclaritywizard.com/podcast. We have some free downloadable materials there, and they can find our calendar link to get some time with our team. We do free consultations, and would love to connect with anyone who could use a little clarity in their brand positioning and how they talk to consumers.
Yeah, this is probably the best time for getting more clarity and differentiation, right? So
absolutely. Q4 is it. Yeah, set up 2025 by doing that today. And what I do a lot in Q4 with clients are clarity workshops. And that can really be any topic that is about the brand strategy. That doesn't necessarily just mean branding and design and packaging or messaging. It can really be about the strategic direction of the brand. We do a lot of workshopping in the Q4 to get people talking to each other. Let's work through assumptions. Let's work through a learning plan so that 2025 is that much stronger. So we'd love to help anyone who's getting ready for killing it next year to make sure they're set up in the right way for that.
Amazing, Kathy. Thank you so much. It was really fascinating and interesting. Although we are far away, I can feel the energy and the enthusiasm about the business and the opportunity. So wish you all the best towards the end of the year. And it's going to be very, very busy and a great 2025. And thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. Agree. This has been a great conversation. I hope to have a chance to come back and chat with you again. Thanks, Eitan.
Thank you for listening to the end of this episode. If you found this episode valuable, please subscribe so you won't miss any of our future content. Explore Vimy, the video commerce platform that includes live shopping, shoppable video, and social commerce capabilities. Visit Vimy at www.vimy.net. We appreciate your support and look forward to bringing you more valuable insights in our next episode.